Aside from the table of baked goods, one of the first things that caught my eye when I interviewed here was the gas-powered Ner Tamid. I've never seen anything like it. Our Ner Tamid, our eternal light, is mounted on the local Kasota stone behind me and shines a flame at all hours. When our building shut down for COVID, it was the image of this flame that came online whenever we started a live stream from Adath. As the world shut down, this flame endured. Our Torah reading, Tetzaveh, begins in Exodus 27, verse 20, with the command God gives the Israelites to kindle the Ner Tamid in the tabernacle. Light was taken from it at dusk each day to kindle the menorah. We read, Ve'ata tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael, v'yikchu elecha shemen zayit zach katit lamaor, leha'alot ner tamid. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Living mostly in the 12th century in Spain, Ibn Ezra, the ultimate grammarian, focuses our attention on the word command and the ways it starts with the Torah but doesn't end there. Ve'ata titzaveh, and you shall command, means there is an eternal command upon the congregation to continually provide olive oil to kindle a perpetual light. My friend and colleague Rabbi Lauren Kurland described it well when she wrote about this week's parashah. She said it was, in essence, a larger fire from which sparks were taken to light smaller fires. I believe a flame is something that can be shared as long as we keep providing the fuel. The light is meant to be shared. It does not diminish when we share it. And it's up to us, as Sforno teaches in the 16th century in Italy, to recommit and to rekindle that light again and again. Sforno focuses on that ongoing need when he writes, Veikhu elecha, as the need would arise in the future after the tabernacle had been completed. The people should not think that donating oil for the menorah now was the only time that this commandment would be actual. It would have to be replaced from time to time as the supply kept would become depleted on an ongoing basis. The fire itself does not weaken, but the determination to fuel it can. Tetzaveh, our reading, is the only portion in which Moshe, once introduced as a character in the Torah, is not mentioned at all by name. But the parsha still opens with a command to keep building, to keep doing, and to keep lighting. The fire itself does not weaken just because something or someone so familiar shifts in the telling of the story. The light spreads. There is no fear that it will be diminished by new ways of telling. This is the story in many ways of multi-heritage relationships or interfaith relationships in our Jewish community. I appreciated learning the term multi-heritage from my teacher and colleague, Rabbi Roli Matalon at B'nai Jeshurun in New York, as they embarked on this path and decided to begin performing multi-heritage wedding ceremonies back in 2017. Interfaith often implies two actively practiced faiths, two fires, so to speak, in the same home. What we are considering at Adath is how best to support couples who are looking to build the fire of a Jewish home in which there is one Jewish partner. Much like the terminology of queer or gay or black or person of color or African American, we know different terms resonate differently, and no one term captures everyone's experience. Today, I will use the terms interchangeably, knowing that multi-heritage is newer and interfaith is more familiar. In our clergy message last week, the Adath clergy team shared that we will be exploring what our participation in wedding ceremonies for multi-heritage couples could look like. Because this is a direction we'd like to go, and we recognize there will be different perspectives, we're eager to launch the listening sessions that we already announced for April 5th, May 1st, and May 3rd, to which all are invited. We are navigating this path together. When I spoke in December about our synagogue's long history that brought us to this point, I want to use the time today to reflect since last week's message came out. But to talk about intermarriage means delving into our approach to Judaism. Judaism has such abundance to it. From learning in a Beit Midrash, a house of study, to making Israel a daily part of our lives, to eating Jewish foods and much more. There is so much potential when we shift from a Judaism treated as weak and diluted simply because more people have access to it, to a Judaism that shines brightly for the people who try to live by its magical glow. Judaism is a precious resource, but not a dwindling resource. We can share our light without fearing somehow that it will diminish. Our story is abundant and rich and has plenty of room for new voices to join. I believe it is true of our Judaism, of our country, and our world. Our decision to embark on this journey involves our relationship to the conservative movement of Judaism. I remain a member in good standing of the Rabbinical Assembly and a member of the Chancellor's Rabbinic Cabinet at the Jewish Theological Seminary, along with about 24 other rabbis from across North America. In fact, next weekend, we are honored at Adath to welcome Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, the Dean of the JTS Rabbinical School. This past fall, I was nominated by JTS to join the slate of officers for the World Zionist Organization election, which you'll hear more about, whose slate also includes Rabbi Kravitz and Chazan Dulkin, who serves as the president of the conservative movement's Cantors Assembly. Chazan Dulkin and I have been invited this spring to teach this year's graduating JTS rabbinical and cantorial students about healthy clergy teams. You could say we remain pretty involved conservative Jews. My professional association, the Rabbinical Assembly, as many of you know, uses a standard of rabbinic practice, written in 1972 to bar all 1,600 conservative rabbis as well as conservative cantors from any kind of verbal participation at interfaith weddings. Like a Minnesota winter, standards were meant to last forever, and there is no mechanism to undo them, which means it will likely take clergy to reinterpret this one out of existence that moves us beyond one categorical, conversation-ending no to several complex and thoughtful responses. I have always been a work within the system kind of guy. You may recall it was impossible for gay people to attend JTS not so long ago, but I decided to keep faith with the process of change on LGBTQ ordination. Since I last publicly spoke about this topic in December, I have discerned that maintaining my RA membership is the best way forward. But to be clear, I am prepared to be kicked out of the RA for defying the standard. That alone would not have an impact on the day-to-day operations of our conservative synagogue, but only serve to reinforce the standard's toxic fumes for individual clergy who believe there must be another way forward. I can tell you that our conservative congregational arm, USCJ, is very much looking to keep our synagogue engaged. Unlike the more geographically diverse and international rabbinical assembly, the USCJ's 600 congregations are all located in North America. The majority of USCJ leadership is already chomping at the bit. They are eager for the rabbinical assembly to change and welcome a diversity of practice. I see what we're doing at Adath as an act of protest or civil disobedience, which is an important way for change to happen in any system. This means we maintain our membership as a conservative congregation with all the benefits of USY, and we push the conversation forward so that A, we move from a stance of disapproval to engagement of multi-heritage couples, and B, we lead the way for change in our movement in the Twin Cities and nationally. We are bringing our determination to light the flame. According to the 2020 Pew Research study, it is estimated that 42% of married Jewish people in the United States are married to a non-Jew. 72% of non-Orthodox Jews who have married since 2010 are married to a non-Jew. I've hesitated to focus too heavily on statistics in our clergy message because there are real people behind those numbers. Krovei Yisrael, those folks in our congregation who are Jewish adjacent, schlep their kids to Heiligtür and Talmud Torah, travel to Israel, and help keep Shabbat and Kashrut. I recall our beloved Don Masler's non-Jewish partner, Jim, both now of blessed memory. Jim went shopping one day at a local kosher market and was for Brent to find a dairy item misplaced next to a meat one, accidentally mixed on one of the shelves. I used to believe my authority as a rabbi rested only in marrying two Jews, but I have come to understand my rabbinic role differently. I came to know the young adults who formed Makom, Adath's vibrant 20s and 30s community. Our non-Jewish Makomniks schlepped as many sidurim and kosher potluck supplies as anyone else in 10 below zero weather. They often brought their Jewish partners back to Judaism as we welcome Shabbat each month with Shabbat lights, services, and dinner. Most of all, these couples told me they believed Judaism had something to say to them and to enrich their relationships and their lives. And I believe my silence was inadequate for a Judaism that is abundant with blessing to share, and for a God whose compassion we are told extends to everyone. I see what we're doing at Adath as opening a conversation that has been full of shame. I learned just this week of a clergy colleague who wanted to offer a few words of blessing at her son's wedding to somebody who's not Jewish. She did not do so as an officiant, but as a guest and a proud mom. Before doing so, she asked all of the wedding guests and venue staff to turn off their cell phones and recording equipment. Why? This colleague feared her participation in her son's wedding might be recorded, God forbid, and that she be outed and ousted from her professional association. Well, some conservative clergy have chosen to participate quietly. Adath will continue to approach this conversation with openness. In that spirit, I have initiated a dialogue with the CEO of USCJ and the RA, Rabbi Jacob Blumenthal, to let him know exactly what we're doing. We are determined to open the many doors to Jewish life, not create more closets. I also see us at Adath as part of a long chain of taking moral leadership. As documented beautifully in a display at the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia, Adath is recognized as one of the first conservative synagogues to welcome Shabbat morning Benot Mitzvah in the early 1940s. And here we are, Sasha, today. Adath was among the first synagogue of any denomination to welcome gay clergy at the senior level. And here, again, we are today. To be clear, in each of those watershed moments, there were voices who cautioned that the inclusion of women, the inclusion of gay people, would utterly destroy Judaism. Gay people may be accused of causing earthquakes and tornadoes, but we still have not caused the destruction of Judaism. And we are here because it is traditional to evolve. It is traditional to keep the flame alive and to tend it in every generation, as Forno urged us in this week's parasha. From the construction of the tabernacle in Tetzaveh to the very moments the temples were destroyed in Jerusalem, the Jewish people have always had to keep the flame alive, incorporating the realities around us to make sure there is perpetual light. 3/4 of the Adath clergy team standing in front of you today would not have been able to stand on this bima for most of Jewish history. And of course, to every argument, there is a slippery slope. But I would choose that complexity again and again. Our conservative movement of Judaism is perfectly situated to meet that challenge if we're willing to accept it. The right question is not whether we will change, but how we will change. Our process was distinctly conservative when it came to affirming the ordination of women and LGBTQ people as rabbis and cantors, of women counting in the minyan, and taking aliyot, and I believe the same to be true now. We turn to the opinions from the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, as well as our movement's leading lights beyond. We study text, and we take into account realities in our community and in the larger Jewish world. We consult as a clergy team with the congregation and affirm the role of the senior rabbi, as is traditional in conservative congregations, as Mara Da'atra, the congregation's authority in matters of Jewish law. Returning to Rabbi Kurland's description of the menorah, we might also imagine Judaism as a larger fire from which sparks are taken to light smaller fires. I believe that's how we keep the flame alive. Sharing does not diminish light, but amplifies the light in all the dark spaces of the world. As with all changes as we step forward, we will also set certain guidelines to be clear and loving. In any change we consider around weddings, we will continue to affirm that Kiddushin is the wedding ceremony between two Jewish people who have affirmed a specifically Jewish covenant. If one partner has decided not to affirm the Jewish covenant as their own, we respect that decision. We therefore will not rely on the uniquely particularistic language of Kiddushin to celebrate a multi-heritage relationship. We respect couples for who they tell us they are. And as with every couple, we should link love to Jewish tradition, to building a Jewish home with a Jewish community and Jewish clergy. We also affirm the conservative movement's stance on matrilineal descent, a practice shared by the Orthodox movement and by the Reform movement outside of the United States. That rabbinic tradition affirms Jewish identity is passed through the mother and is otherwise taken on through the conversion process. Speaking of, I will continue to champion conversion as a beautiful path into Judaism. I believe adults convert to Judaism for all kinds of reasons and at different timelines. And I am sensitive that people choose not to convert for all kinds of reasons. The last thing people need is pressure. We endured a massive campaign of pressure for decades, railing against intermarriage and intermarried Jews, hoping that all would magically disappear if we made more policies and shouted them louder. The best pressure that works here is feeling the pounding heart of another human being, extending a warm welcome to a Shabbos or holiday meal, a genuine invitation to experience the joy of Judaism, to walk through one of the many doors to Jewish life that indicate, I see you for who you are. I'm ready to walk with you in the depth and substance of our tradition. Since the clergy message went out, I have received handwritten notes and emails from families in our congregation, including one from a young adult who lives out of town and whose bat mitzvah I officiated. Growing up, she wrote, I always assumed I would marry someone Jewish. However, during my sophomore year of college, I met my now boyfriend, who checked almost all the boxes but one. I've grappled with the question of how I'll be received in the Jewish community as we think about marriage. This is not a kid who's rejecting us. She clearly loves Judaism, so much so she's working at a large conservative congregation, much like our own. And she is seeking to find home with her Jewish-adjacent boyfriend. Judaism is abundant, and Judaism is magical. I'm hopeful we can share that abundance and magic without fear a life rich with blessing, learning, and action, of looking out for those on the margins and building a brighter world as God's partners. From the 2016 study conducted by Brandeis University's Cohen Center for Modern Jewish Studies, we already know that intermarried couples married by a sole Jewish clergy officiant are 3 times more likely to raise Jewish children, and on multiple measures of Jewish engagement, including synagogue involvement, intermarried couples whose weddings were presided by a rabbi or cantor look very similar to 2 Jews who get married. But let me be clear. It's not okay to foist all of our anxieties about the Jewish future on the backs of multi-heritage couples, as if it's their responsibility alone to carry the Jewish future. But it is okay, I believe, for Jewish clergy to ask all couples for whom they officiate or participate to be part of building the kind of home and Jewish community we at Adath stand for. The Cohen Center study asserts, weddings are a pivotal moment in the life of all couples, but particularly so for intermarrying partners. The process leading up to the ceremony can provide a unique opportunity for the couple to articulate their religious identity, commitments, and connections to the larger Jewish community. By now, I hope you realize this is a moment of opportunity not only for multi-heritage couples, but also for every single one of us to articulate the kind of abundant Judaism we believe is possible. It's up to us. Ibn Ezra and Sephorno remind us, for the flame to be eternal. It is eternal when we commit our presence and bring our determination to make it last, even when it changes. To evolve is to be traditional. To evolve helps us reach this moment with our bat mitzvah Sasha, with all of us, and into the future. I pray this direction will build and strengthen our Adath community. We want to create a community in which every one of us is embraced. Even when Moshe doesn't appear in the text, even when things change, the light we have is meant to last. The flame grows. It remains eternally bright as our Ner Tamid, and God willing, we live in its warmth for generations to come. And let us say, Amen.